Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is overflowing with hope. I know that I am. Um, I loved the music that was selected for tonight, especially the first song that we listened to, the Amy Grant song. Has been done many times, but I love it. Put a little love in your heart. Gotta admit, I was sitting here kind of bopping a little bit when the song was playing, so I really enjoyed that one a lot. If you've spent any time around me at all, or a significant amount of time around me, you know that my life is basically lived through kind of a never-ending stream of song lyrics, movie lines, and pop culture references. So if you ever hear something weird come out of my mouth, it's probably one of those things. It's either a pop culture reference or a movie line or something like that. So I actually want to tell a couple of stories today that pertain to pop culture a little bit. First of all, give me a thumbs up in the chat or hit the react with a thumbs up if you know who Miss Rachel is. Anybody? Oh, there's one. Somebody knows who Miss Rachel is. Yay. So, for those that don't know, there's another one who knows who Miss Rachel is. Miss Rachel, oh, yay, there's lots of people who know she is. She has a YouTube channel that's called Songs for Littles. Um, and Miss Rachel, to be honest, made me realize that I needed to do some things differently in my life because she helped me realize that I was starting to develop a little bit of angry old man syndrome. You know, that one where you shake your fist at walnuts for falling and tell the kids to get out of your yard. I was starting to suffer from a little bit of that. And Miss Rachel helped me talk about her. I do want to jump into the Wayback Machine. Speaking of pop culture references, if you believe the rumors that have been told about me, I was a pretty difficult child to raise. Um, I was basically filled with what seemed like an infinite amount of energy, and I was pretty difficult to handle. So much so that even in preschool, my mom sought a babysitter for me for a couple of hours a day. And that babysitter was our 19-inch RCA TV when PBS played the 2 hours of children's programming. I would sit crisscross applesauce about 3 feet from the TV and focus on what was in front of me. And I loved the three shows that played during that 2 hours. I loved Sesame Street and I loved Electric Company. And Bert and Ernie at a young age taught me how to count. And Ruth Buzzy taught me how to read at a very young age. So I loved Electric Company and I loved Sesame Street, but my all-time favorite was always Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I loved Mr. Rogers. There was just something about him, you know. He had that familiar, same everyday trademark zip-up cardigan sweater, and he'd put on his canvas sneakers at the beginning of each show as he sang to the screen, and he had the great puppets, and he was so soft-spoken. And I think that one of the things that really got me with Mr. Rogers is that he talked directly to the camera. So it really felt like he was speaking directly to me when he spoke. And he taught me, at least, about manners and about kindness. And he taught me that my imagination and my feelings were okay. He actually had an incredibly successful run. His show was on the air from 1968 until 2001. So for over 30 years, he came into preschoolers' living rooms every single day for a half hour a day. But in 2001, after he retired, he came out of his retirement very briefly at the end of 2001. Um, for the purpose of making an albeit brief, but make a political statement to the world. The 9/11 attacks had happened, and those of us who were around when 9/11 happened, I'm sure most of us remember exactly where we were when we learned about the attacks and what we were doing. And I know that we can all remember that there was a lot of fear. We didn't know what was going to happen next. There was a lot of anger among the American people that people would actually come and try to weaponize daily life. Um, there were a lot of opinions on who our enemies happened to be and what we should do when we found them. So, and people were not afraid to loudly voice what their opinions were regarding uh, that subject or the people that we believed were the perpetrators of it. So, Mr. Rogers came on to give his political slant in a message that was less than a minute long, like just the length of a commercial. Um, and his words were, no matter what our particular job, especially in our world today, we are all called to be tikkun olam, repairers of creation. Thank you for whatever you do, wherever you are, to bring joy and light and hope and faith and pardon and love to your neighbor and to yourself. And I just have always loved that phrase, tikkun olam. Isn't that a cool phrase? It's a Hebrew phrase that means, like I said, repairs of creation. And I thought it was such a great, cool response to a national tragedy that in the face of fear, that his message, his politics were a message of joy and a message of hope and a message of love. Not everybody was a fan of that, though, and they thought that Mr. Rogers should stay out of the political arena, even retired Mr. Rogers. People have always loved to knock down the people that they don't agree with, including Mr. Rogers. And back then, 2001, that was kind of the early days of the internet, when some of us still thought that Al Gore did invent it. It was the early days of the internet. And so rumors about Mr. Rogers flew around the internet. My personal favorite rumor, and some of you may have heard this one, is that before he did his show, he was a sniper for the Navy SEALs in Vietnam. And the reason why he wore his long sleeve sweaters was to cover up all of the tattoos that he got while he was in the Navy. That was my personal favorite. But I was a fan of Mr. Rogers, and I didn't want to hear any of that. I didn't want to hear any of that nonsense, and so I did what I do, and I took to the internet, and I clicked and clacked away at the typewriter keyboard to do some research on Mr. Rogers, and I found because I wanted to know. I wanted to know if he really was a sniper, if any of these other horrible rumors were true. And of course, none of them are true. Mr. Rogers actually grew up in a small town, Latrobe, Pennsylvania. He graduated high school and went to college to get a degree in music, of all things. One summer, while he was home visiting, his dad had bought this newfangled thing called a television set. And he was fascinated with the television, and so he turned it on, and he loved the idea of being able to reach thousands, if not millions, of people, but he was also simultaneously dismayed that he could not find any programming that he thought was suitable for children. And working with children and showing children love was always a passion of his. So when he graduated with his degree, he went to Pittsburgh and went to seminary. While he was at seminary, to get that degree, he worked at a local TV station where he invented some of his puppets in a segment on a local public channel in Pittsburgh called Children's Corner. And when he graduated, he became a ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church and debuted his show in 1968. Now, I watched him as a preschooler, but it escaped me. And what I didn't realize is that through Mr. Rogers' entire career, he was always quite political. He spoke to preschoolers about some really hard-hitting topics, things like divorce and death and war and disability. But probably the most controversial show that he did aired in 1969. It was a particularly hot day in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and he normally filmed the show from inside of his living room or from inside of his kitchen. But it was so hot that he went outside and he sat down in his chair and he took off his trademark canvas sneakers and he rolled up his cufflinks and he pulled out a kiddie pool and he filled that kiddie pool with water and he stuck his feet in the pool. And he was telling me personally how great it felt on such a hot day to have his feet in the water, uh, and was telling that story. And if you remember Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, he had visitors, he had guests from the neighborhood that would pop in and say hello. Well, on this particular day, Officer Clemens came by and commented to Mr. Rogers on what a hot day it happened to be. And Mr. Rogers said, "Well, Officer Clemens, why don't you take off your shoes? Why don't you roll up your cufflinks? Why don't you, or your pant cuffs? And why don't you sit down and put your feet in the cool water with me?" Officer Clemens said, "I would love to. That sounds amazing, but I don't have a towel." And Mr. Rogers said, "That's okay. You can borrow my towel." So Officer Clemens sat down in the chair and he rolled up his cuffs and he stuck his feet in the water, and the two of them chatted for a few minutes. And when they were done chatting, Officer Clemens pulled his feet out, put them on Mr. Rogers' lap, and Mr. Rogers dried Officer Clemens' feet for him. Now, you may be asking yourself, how is that a political statement? Well, the answer is it should not be a political statement. But it was 1969, and Officer Clemens was black. 1968 saw the assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. There were protests and riots over the Civil Rights Act being passed. There was a lot of turmoil. There was still segregation, and people were dragging their heels on segregation in many parts of the country, and even in parts that did not have across the board segregation. Public pools in most places were all segregated. Mr. Rogers, through the simple act of kindness of asking a person to sit down and join him in community and cool his feet in the pool, was I don't I don't have any word other than to say that that statement was incredible. Now, he didn't say what people should not be doing. He didn't tell us how we should feel about segregation or racism. He just gave this act of kindness. And throughout his career, Mr. Rogers' politics were always lived out just like our enduring principles. He spoke of the blessings of community. He spoke of grace and generosity. He spoke of unity and diversity, just to name a few. And yes, he even said, all are called to be repairers of creation. And that brings me to Miss Rachel. My story about Miss Rachel. So a couple of years ago, my daughter and grandson came to stay with us for a couple of weeks. And I swear to you, I am not exaggerating when I say this. For that 2 week period, the only thing that was on the television in our house was YouTube. And the only thing that was viewed on YouTube was Miss Rachel's Songs for Littles. And we would watch an episode, and then we would watch the next episode, and then we would get done with all the episodes, and then we'd start all over from the beginning. And my grandson Brian would sit there and watch and talk to Miss Rachel as well as he could. And it was so annoying, completely annoying. she would come out in this ridiculous outfit that was kind of her trademark. It was a pink shirt with a headband that she wore every day. And she had this really annoying, calm voice and the soothing voice. And she talked and sang directly to the young people watching television, directly at the camera, as if she was talking to those directly. And some of those songs were educational, but a lot of them were just plain old earworms. You know, like that television commercial jingle that just pops into your head and you can't get it out of your head for some reason. I swear there were nights when I woke up in a cold sweat singing, "Oh, Mr. Sun, Sun, Mr. Golden Sun," and I still live those nightmares today. But it got to the point with Miss Rachel where I was vocally expressing my annoyance about Miss Rachel to my daughter and asking her why she would let him watch so much trash. He was only 18 months old at the time, and he's on the autism spectrum, and he was nonverbal, so he is developmentally delayed. And so, in my opinion, the last thing that that boy needed was cotton candy for the brain. But she insisted, sometimes very frustratingly with me, that I was shaking my fist at the walnuts, that Miss Rachel was amazing, and that she was helping teach him how to speak and count and learn the alphabet. Not to mention that she set a terrific example for how to treat other people. But me, I was having none of it. I was having none of it, and so what did I do? Just like with Mr. Rogers, I went to the keyboard and I started clacking away at the keyboard on the computer because I just knew that there was dirt out there on Miss Rachel, that there was some skeletons in Miss Rachel's closet and I was going to find them. And I knew they had to be there because there was no way that I was overreacting to the situation. And there was no way that my daughter could possibly be right. And so I started researching, and here is what I found. Miss Rachel went to college to get a degree in music, and then she got a second degree in early childhood development. She put herself through school by working at a Boys and Girls Club in Maine, where she lived at the time, and she taught and sang to refugee children who were just settling in the United States. Married and she had a son. Her son was on the spectrum and was developmentally delayed, including being nonverbal until he was 2. So now I'm starting to feel a little bit like garbage. Where's the dirt? It's got to be here. Where are the tattoos? Where's the sniper rifle in the background of one of the pictures of her? It's got to be here somewhere. So I kept digging. And it turns out that as she was teaching her son to speak, she went to this relatively new technology, this newfangled thing called streaming, to look for content that could help her with her son. And she was dismayed that she could not find anything out there like that. Is this story starting to sound a little familiar, by the way? She was dismayed that she couldn't find anything like that. And she said, someone really should make a show for developmentally delayed children and for toddlers to teach them the alphabet, the ABCs, counting, and just that they are okay. And she wished somebody would do it, and she wound up being the one who did it. Her YouTube channel launched in 2019, and in 5 years, she racked up over 12 billion, not million, 12 billion views. To put that in perspective, speaking of annoying things that you find on the internet, that song that couldn't get out of anybody's head for years, Gangnam Style, you remember, Oppa Gangnam Style, that was at one time the most viewed thing on the internet. It's been out there since 2012, and it only has 5 billion views. Miss Rachel has over 12 billion views. She too has a variety of guests that show the richness of diversity in our world today. She does not tell people what they should not be doing or saying. She just treats everybody with love, with kindness, and with care. She has also been known to be political. For example, when Pride Month came about a couple of years ago, she put a pride flag in the background on her television set. Quite political, but that's not what brought her the most heat. What brought her the most heat was in 2024, she joined a platform online called Cameo. Do you guys know what Cameo is? Okay. Cameo is basically a website. There's a thumbs up. Cameo is a website that has literally thousands of celebrities, people that are television, movie personalities, singers, athletes, retired athletes, thousands of people that are on there. And for a fee of between $50 and $500 usually, you can hire one of these celebrities to create a personalized video greeting for you and send it to somebody. We've used Cameo in our fantasy football league to record a cameo to give us what our draft position is every year. It's always a lot of fun and it's kind of neat. Now, most of the people that are on Cameo do these cameos because, they're not A-list celebrities. You're not going to find Brad Pitt on there, but you'll find some B, C, and D celebrities on there. And so they need a little help making the mortgage or they need to pay for their vacation or whatever. That's not what Miss Rachel went on to Cameo for. Miss Rachel went on Cameo in 2024 and she made a TikTok video where she announced to the people that follow her on TikTok that she was going to sell 500 cameos for $100 a piece. All of the money, 100% of the money that she received from those videos would go to the Save the Children's Emergency Fund, specifically to help children in war-torn areas like Gaza, like the Sudan, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, and like the Ukraine. In just a few hours, she sold all 500 of those videos and continues to raise funds today. And since then has raised over $250,000 for the Save the Children's Emergency Fund. And she took a lot of heat for this. She took a lot of heat because most of us adults have really big feelings about the aforementioned countries, one way or the other. She was told by people to be quiet and sing. Some people even canceled her. But she went on TikTok again and she made a TikTok to respond to that backlash. And her message was simple. No matter where children are from, they all have fundamental human rights, which include water, food, medical care, shelter, education, and protection from violence. Again, not a list of things that we shouldn't be doing, but her political statement was one of words and actions that uphold our enduring principles. The blessings of community, unity and diversity, grace and generosity, and yes, one of her heroes is Mr. Rogers. And she has also similarly expressed that we are all called to be tikkun olam. Needless to say, I figured out that I just needed to do some work on myself, that Miss Rachel was great. And now I even follow Miss Rachel on Instagram and TikTok. And all of my children who have children are fans of Miss Rachel as well. Now, why does this make me overflow with hope? Because my children are not alone, obviously. 12 billion views. And young people today have a deep understanding of what it means to truly love thy neighbor. And even though we as old people can often be critical of the amount of time that some millennials and Gen Z people spend with electronic media, they almost all find the Miss Rachels of the world out there. And instead of using this new technology exclusively as a babysitter, they are interested in seeking those voices that will share that wonderful political message with their children. The politics that can be summed up with two beautiful words, tikkun olam. May God continue to bless us on our journey.